service in the house.
Bucket hat. It's bucket hat time.
TC, you're undefeated, man. You're undefeated.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the TC and Company podcast. Tom Caron with you, a little groggy-eyed as we do these West Coast games. Red Sox with one more in Anaheim as we do this, a day off, and then the weekend in Arizona. And the first of 3 West Coast trips will be behind them. The bats suddenly going quiet, which is the last thing you expected from this team. The offense has been carrying the way all year, but just one run in the last 3 games, shutout last night in the second game of the series. And the frustrating thing is the last couple of losses, the first 2 games in Anaheim, have really wasted terrific starts. Tanner Houck and Brian Bayo turned in really strong performances. Bayo is on a roll right now and gave up just a pair of solo home runs, 7 innings, a career high for Bayo, and he gave up just those 2 runs. So really good outing for Bayo. Houck showing he belongs in the rotation. And then today, the word coming down that he will stay in the rotation. Corey Kluber being sent to the bullpen, a surprise there, in part because he's never been a reliever, not because of the numbers. The numbers would clearly dictate that Houck has earned the right to stay in the rotation over Kluber. But Houck has pitched out of the bullpen. I think some people thought it's just easier to put Houck back in the bullpen and try to keep working with Kluber. But the decision made to go with the best 5 starters. And so now you have a rotation of Chris Sale, James Paxton, Tanner Houck, Brian Bayo, and Garrett Whitlock, who returns this weekend. That's a pretty good major league rotation if all stay healthy. That's a big if, with Sale and Paxton certainly at the top of that rotation. But that's where we go. So the Kluber news is big. And it's really just the beginning of sifting through some tough roster decisions. A lot of infielders on the way back. Christian Arroyo and Yu Chang. Trevor Story maybe eventually. Alberto Mondesi, we haven't heard a lot about him, but he's looming off there somewhere as he rehabs. And all that coming as Manuel Valdez and Pablo Reyes have been really good additions to this team, along with Kike Hernandez, who has been up and down defensively, but seems to be trending in a better direction on the defensive side. And you know what he means to the offense when he gets going. So a lot of questions about how that will sift itself out, how the decision to send both Corey Kluber and Nick Pivetta out of the rotation to the bullpen. And we've got the perfect guy to do it this week. Chief Baseball Officer Chaim Bloom sits down to talk about the state of the team about a third of the way into the season. Bloom, the guest on this week's TC and Company podcast. All right, we're joined this week by Chief Baseball Officer Chaim Bloom. And Chaim, somebody smarter than me once said you get a third of a season to figure out who you are, a third of a season to figure out what you need, and a third of the season to go for whatever you're going to end up going for. So we're about a third of the season in, right? 50 games in. So what are the 2023 Red Sox?
Well, I think the quickest way I would sum it up is, I think this team is a bunch of grinders on the offensive side, especially, and it's a fun group. Obviously we're in a little bit of an offensive rut of late, but I think we've seen enough from this offense to know what the identity is, which is just a group that's going to wear you down. It's going to make you earn every out. And that's exactly who we hope to be in spring training. And the cool thing there is everybody's bought in. It's not just something that's happened. It's become the identity of this group. It's something they take pride in. And it actually stands out on a given night when you don't see it. Most nights you expect a battle and you expect the opposing starter to get worn down. And then hopefully that leads to runs. And on the pitching side, I think we've obviously seen some ups and downs, but, almost pretty much to a man, everybody, especially these younger, less experienced guys, have shown the upside that they have. And I think you could say some of these guys, you look at someone like Josh Winkowski, he's carried us the whole way so far. And that's exciting to see too.
So if that's question 1, who are the Red Sox? I guess question 2 is, what will the Red Sox need over the next 50 games? What does this team need to improve on? What do you need to improve on as a group to maybe get this team to the next step?
Yeah, I mean, looking right now at obviously this group in-house, like I said, what's exciting is that we do have young players taking steps forward. I think we're seeing that in the rotation as we go. We've seen it in the bullpen, and we've seen it with some position players, and hopefully there's more to come, and also some guys who have not yet contributed, whether that's because they're on the injured list or because they're still working their way through the minor leagues, that are going to have a chance to help us and have a chance to be part of us doing something special. But really, I think on the pitching side, excuse me, on the pitching side in particular, I think it's just the consistency of attacking the strike zone and going for the kill, being our best selves. And what I mean by that is these guys coming into their own, understanding how they get their outs, understanding where their stuff plays, how to use it. We see that start to start with some of these young pitchers and the adjustments that they make. And that needs to continue so that everybody there can perform really at the peak of their ability more often than not. We've seen a lot of encouraging signs in that direction, and we just need to make sure that keeps going. And then on the offensive side of the ball, from our hitters, again, we've seen young hitters make a lot of strides. We just need to see that continue really and stay consistent with it so that these guys keep improving. We're also, I think, seeing some good things defensively, but obviously that's a part of a game where we could be more consistent as well. So, we've shown a top end here as we've done what we've done. That's really, really exciting. And that's been a lot of fun to watch night in, night out. I think what's going to determine how far we go is how consistently we can hit that top end.
And obviously what the rotation does is a big part of that, right? And a couple of weeks ago, I called it the rotation Hunger Games. You had 6 and then 7 guys fighting their way to stay in that rotation. The news today that Corey Kluber was told he's out. Now, I think as a fan, you can look at this and say the numbers speak for themselves. Houck's been really good. Kluber hasn't been as good. Make that decision. But there's more to it than that, obviously. I mean, this is a guy who's won a couple Cy Youngs. He's been a starting pitcher. You signed him to be a starting pitcher. How difficult is that decision, and how difficult was the conversation with Corey?
Yeah, well, look, with these guys in general, one thing about this team, and I think the staff has done a great job with this, Alex has done a great job with it. Excuse me. Sorry.
It's allergy season, just to be clear. We got to get an allergy medication to be the sponsor.
Clearing my throat a couple times. I tried to take a sip of water and it went down the wrong pipe. No, the one thing we've seen with this team, as these starters have gone to the bullpen, I understand a lot of guys want to start. Most guys want to start, but when they go out there, it's not like they're going out there into some obscure roles. These starters who are out in the bullpen are helping us win games. And, someone like Winkowski's done that from day one. Cutter obviously jumped in there. He's done it. Nick is going to start doing that. Obviously, Corey, we haven't seen out there yet, but, that is how we've used our starters out of the bullpen. So it's still a meaningful role. Now, with all that said, when you talk about Corey, you said it. This guy's been doing this for a long time. He has won the Cy Young Award more than once. That's pretty impressive. But one thing about Corey that I can tell you, this guy is as professional as they come. We knew that coming in here. Frankly, we didn't hope certainly to be having that type of conversation with him. You could not have handled that better than Corey Kluber did. He was receptive. He was accountable. He wants to win. He obviously wants to contribute more than he has. I don't think this is bugging anybody, these results that he's had, more than it's bugging Corey. And, he's going to continue to grind and work just like he has been. And, his goal is to win.
When you look at him, what he is at this point in his career, and the walks, I think, are the surprising thing, right? When you signed him, you talked about him being part of that effort to reclaim the strike zone. Do you see who he is right now translating into a successful bullpen role, or how much work will be needed to help him get to that?
Well, in any role, the command, the execution has to be better than what it's been for him so far. And like you said, that's really been the surprising thing. We know at this stage in his career, with everything he's been through medically, he is not featuring the stuff that the guy who won 2 Cy Young Awards is featuring. But as he's shown the last couple of years, with the stuff that he has, he can have plenty of success because he executes and commands so well. And that just hasn't happened so far this season. He hasn't done that. I think he'd be the first to tell you that. Why that is, obviously, that's a daily process, him and our staff and analysts and everybody bringing some brain power to bear on why exactly this has happened the way it's happened, because it's so unlike him. But the fact of the matter is, without that, it's going to be difficult for him. So we're hopeful that, this allows us to find some success that was eluding him, pitching every 5th, 6th day.
Nick Pivetta. I mean, I always said, that relief appearance in the 2021 playoffs against Tampa Bay, that was, to me, as good a relief appearance as we've seen maybe since Nate Eovaldi in the World Series, right? It's a guy who's an emotional guy with velocity. There's a lot of things there that you could look and say, this guy could be a really good reliever. He could also be a really good starter. What was that conversation like? Because again, he was a guy who kind of publicly said, I see myself as a starting pitcher.
Yeah. And he does. I mean, I think that is how he has identified. And look, Nick, since we got him in that starting role, he has taken the ball literally every time. And I don't think we could say that about any other starter we've had since I've been here. Just the durability and the willingness and the ability to go out there and give every effort, every fifth day is something that really sets him apart and something that he takes pride in. So from that standpoint, it was difficult. But, we saw it obviously out of the pen in his first appearance. He's going to be just fine out there. He can do that role. Our job is to help him, hit his ceiling as consistently as we can in whatever role he's in. And I think with these two guys, look, obviously everybody needs to contribute to help us win. We're in a position where if you say in a vacuum, is Nick Pivetta a guy that you'd want to have in your rotation? I would say yes. I think he's better than these results that he's shown so far. But we're in a position where we have to make some decisions, and he's going to be able to help us contribute in the other role. So I don't think us doing this is saying that this guy can't start, won't start again. None of that. It's just where we are and how best to use our guys to help us win.
Part of why you're here is the return of Garrett Whitlock, obviously. And last year when he signed the extension, you and he both talked about seeing the innings, see if he can become that starter that you all think he can be. Maybe coincidentally, maybe not. The injuries have come when he's been a starting pitcher, right? He was healthy as a reliever in 2021. Was there much thought given to maybe he's not a starter? Maybe the arm is going to last longer out of the relief role. Was that a concern at all? Or, are they not connected?
It's actually something we talked about a lot at the end of last season, both amongst ourselves and with Garrett. When he went in for that surgery and we talked about what he was going to do coming out of it. And look, obviously some of these things, with medical situations, it's hard to know everything. To the best of what we can tell, the role really had nothing to do with the injury that happened last year. That was something that he'd been battling all year, probably something that was frankly pre-existing, that just hadn't been aggravated even when he was pitching out of the bullpen in 21. And what aggravated it, it's hard to tell. He had a play at first base actually in a relief role early in last season where he got that raspberry on his knee that might have tipped that off. And then once it happened, just the successive grind of the season, kept making that worse and worse. Is that the reason? That's probably the closest thing we could point to, but I don't know that we'll ever know exactly what flared that up. But there was something structural underneath that was able to be addressed by surgery once it did flare up. Pitchers can have these issues and pitch with them for a decade plus and they never flare up, and then something happens and suddenly they do. So, we can't say definitively. I don't think we have that crystal ball, but as far as we could tell, what happened last year really was more something that could have happened in either role. Now, that being said, obviously we won't know until we see. We basically just felt that looking at it all, it's a different grind being a reliever, right? There's less workload, but it's also less predictable. And as a starter, you have a chance to build a routine, and some guys thrive more in one than the other. This is such a unique path. Most guys who end up in the bullpen doing what Garrett did in 21, they end up there because they started in the big leagues and couldn't do it. And they got a lot of chances to do it and couldn't do it. And then they go to the pen. We haven't seen that from him yet. He has the desire to do it. I think when that changeup's right, which hopefully coming out of this rehab, it will be again. He has a repertoire that can get both sides out. So, especially knowing that it's something that he wants to do, that he takes pride in being one of those horses that can take on a big workload, and knowing what that could mean both this year and down the road for the organization if he shows he can do it. We just thought we'd be shorting ourselves, shorting him, not to give him a chance. And that means really giving him a chance and hopefully not having every start be a referendum on whether he can do it or not.
You've got two guys right now, essentially at the top of the rotation, who you put a lot of faith in, Chris Sale, James Paxton, to come back. More Sale, obviously. I feel like how many spring trainings in a row did you say we feel Chris Sale now is ready to be Chris Sale? And suddenly we're seeing it. I know you're not going to take a victory lap. But for the organization and for the work that was put in, he's talked about it, his appreciation for what everyone behind the scenes did to get him back to this. But how good does it feel for the organization that this work is paying off? Because there was no guarantee especially at those first couple of starts this year, right? There was no guarantee that Chris Sale would look like this.
Yeah, of course. And there's no victory lap to take. We're just happy that this is the guy that we're seeing. His work has been in place all along, and I'm glad that he singled out our staff, and because so many people, and this isn't just true of Chris, it's true of a lot of players in this organization. So many people have poured so much into Chris during so many different rehabs to try to get him back. And I promise you, when he's out there, they are basically living through him. They feel those successes just the same, and I'm happy for them. I'm happy for our people who are doing this and just bring so much professional pride to it every day. And look, it hasn't been linear for him either. You talk about someone who is as accomplished as just about anybody who's out there pitching, and after so many bumps and bruises and so much time off, we're seeing him go through the process of relearning who he is. But man, it's exciting when you see him take these steps, because he probably isn't even, I think he would probably tell you, he isn't even fully locked in yet. And every time he takes the ball, it seems like we're seeing glimmers of something that we haven't seen in a while. You know, even this last start against San Diego, obviously him going out there and just bullying a really, really good hitter with a right-handed hitter with 3 straight sliders. He hasn't done that probably at any point that I've been here. That's something he used to do when he was in his prime, and now we're seeing him get back to being able to do it again. And I don't have to tell you or anybody who cares enough about the Red Sox that they're listening to us today how important that is for us.
And James Paxton, I mean, he'll be taking them out tonight under the watchful eyes of the Boris Corporation. This is a guy who could have left, right? I mean, a lot of people thought he would, but I think it says a lot about the organization that he felt comfortable with your staff. He felt comfortable with the work he was putting in here, that this would afford him the best route back to the majors. Again, that has to feel good as an organization, right?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, just knowing, again, the people who have rehabbed him, and with everything he's been through, and obviously he's been to a few different organizations, and trying to get through to the end of this tunnel and basically reach that light at the end of the tunnel. You know, it isn't just about, hey, let me see what the free agent market has for me financially. It's knowing who you're going to be working with, and the fact that he wanted to continue working with our medical staff, with our pitching coaches. That's a feather in our cap. And like I said, I'm happy for them, proud that we are an organization that somebody who certainly would have had different options, chose to stay with, and now happy for him and for us that he's finally back and, showing why we signed him in the first place.
When we talk about the rotation and what you've sifted through, you've got that looming potentially on the infield, right? You've got guys coming back now. Trevor Story, probably is on the back end of it, but Yu Chang's getting closer. I'm not sure where Adalberto Mondesi is right now, but Christian Arroyo is getting closer. You've got all these guys coming back, where Valdez has been playing really well, and Reyes has been a find. Kike Hernandez is improving by and large defensively, and obviously such an important hitter. I know you can't worry about these things because a lot can happen over the next couple of weeks that's sifted up, but your job is to worry about these things, right? So does this become a problem? Because you can't keep everybody.
Yeah, and to the extent that it is, it's obviously a good problem. And you're right, it is. It's going to be upon us soon, hopefully. With Christian and with you, ready to go out soon on rehab assignments, getting closer, and a lot of these other guys you mentioned over the course of the summer. Look, we know these days in baseball, you're not going to get that far out without some other things happening, and that's why you try to warehouse as much talent as you possibly can. But as you said, there are limitations. The roster only has 26. Right. And the 40-man only has 40. And, some of these guys, you have the flexibility to send them to the minor leagues, but if they're performing, you may not want to, because you don't want to hurt your team. So there's a lot of different things to juggle. And it's actually something, as you said, it's mostly speculative at this point, but it is something we've already started talking about internally. We have to, because we have to be ready for it. And I just view it as a really good turn of events that obviously we were in a situation a couple of weeks ago where we went outside the organization to add Pablo because we didn't have that right person in-house. And now, hopefully, we are not too far from a situation where we have more candidates than spots. That does lead to some tough decisions. And I can't sit here and tell you we know exactly how we're going to work through that, but we are talking about those possibilities, and they tend to work themselves out. But to me, I would much rather be in this situation than not have enough. If we're in this situation right now, it tells me that, whether it was Chang last year, picking him up on waivers and then signing him again this spring, and now him getting a little confidence going, showing what he can do. Pablo Reyes, our player acquisition group, did a tremendous job flagging this guy as a candidate to bring in, and he's come in and frankly looked better than we expected. That's a good situation to be in. And we really need to make sure we're doing that at all times with every part of this club, because depth is so important as you go through a season.
I think everybody thought Valdez could hit at any level, right? But the question was the defense, and he came in and right away the 3 errors in 2 games, and he's hearing all about it. He made a play last night in the first inning to get that force out. It was a terrific play. And you talk to anybody around the organization, this is a guy who's put in a tremendous amount of work. But even beyond, it's one to say he goes out and takes grounders every day, right? This guy's working strength and conditioning to be more lateral and be able to get to balls. It's not often a guy's doing that at the major league level while getting ready to face major league hitting. How impressive has his development been over these last few weeks?
Yeah, it's been great to see, and we are seeing the results. And some of that, I think, is confidence. When he first came up and he made all those errors, I was telling people internally who weren't that familiar with the player, like, I know this guy still needs to work on his defense, but he's not going to be this bad. That's not who he is. And, some of that might have just been nervousness with him getting used to this level. He's built a good routine, and you can see the results of it. Now, that's still a work in progress, of course, but we are pointed in the right direction. And, just shows on top of, all the guys know, obviously, the bat so often, as a major league player, is what carries you and what carries your value. And knowing that for him, that's a strength, it makes it, even more impressive that he's willing to go work on his defense the way he is.
Connor Wong has been so much fun to watch. And, I joked the other day on the show that, did the Dodgers get enough in the Connor Wong trade? We'll see how that plays out. But I know that it wasn't an easy trade, right? The way that went down, you guys spent a lot of time looking at a lot of possible players that may or may not have been part of this. How'd you land on Wong? He's not, central casting isn't sending him to be the catcher in Major League 5, right? In a movie. He doesn't look like a catcher. He's athletic, but we see what that has translated to. Did you ever see this coming? Obviously, you thought he could be a good Major League catcher, but has he surpassed your expectations?
Whenever you get anybody who is an A-ball, AA, I don't think you have a right, unless you're talking about an absolute blue chip prospect, of which, realistically, even among these guys that are really talented, there aren't that many that you would actually bet on this. So to the extent that someone's developing into a good big leaguer, and look, Connor will be the first to tell you there's a lot more improvement left. We think there is. I hope with more reps, he continues to get better on both sides of the ball, because I think there's still a lot more things that he can do. But, so you don't have a right to expect it, but this is kind of what you hope for whenever you're acquiring anybody who's still in the minor leagues. And for that matter, some big leaguers, but especially prospects. You have a vision of, this is what this guy looks like when he's a good big leaguer. And you have to prepare yourself that because they are prospects, a lot of them are not going to get there. That is just how it works. Our job as an organization is to have a development system that gets as many guys there as possible, and hopefully more than the competition. And that's something that we spend a lot of time on every day. But the short answer is, yeah, this is what we hope for. It really, when we were looking at him, obviously he didn't have a ton of catching experience. He had some really interesting tools on both sides of the ball. It comes down, the intriguing things about him, it comes down to athleticism and makeup. That this guy, for the position in particular, is a really special athlete. There aren't that many guys who are back there that can just do some of the things physically, in terms of being able to, frankly, like, get it down to second base as quickly and run as fast as he can, and to be able to do both those things. He's in a very exclusive club amongst major league catchers for just the combo of the arm and the legs, and that speaks to the athleticism that he has. And the makeup, you got to want it. If you're going to be a catcher, you're going to need to want that leadership role, and you're going to have to want to push yourself, because when you are back there, you're not just performing for yourself. You're there to get the pitcher through the game, and you have to take pride in that every night. And Connor does. And some guys have that and some guys don't. And you can try to make a catcher out of somebody who doesn't have that, and it's probably not going to work. We felt really confident, just the homework that we had done on him as a prospect, that this guy is wired right to do this. That doesn't mean it's going to come easy. In fact, it's not, but that's precisely why the makeup is so important. And he's showing that, those pitchers trust him. I think they trusted him even before he started to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And that just speaks to, they know he cares, that they know he is in this not just for his own performance, but he's in it to win. And that means having their back as a pitcher.
Couple last things I want to ask before we let you go. Marcel Meyer had his first professional 2-home run game last night. I know there was that sort of first round of promotions. I know he's dealing with a little shoulder thing right around that same time. Maybe that factored in, maybe not. But is he getting close to maybe taking that next step and going to Portland?
Well, if there are any doubts about where the shoulder thing is, I think the week he's had will show you it's just fine, which is great to see. Look, he obviously having been at the level last year and then coming out of the gate, even before the results started to show up, a lot of the under the surface things were really good. And now the results have been there. There's always this balance, making sure you're not moving a guy too quickly versus not letting him stagnate. Fact of the matter is he's been one of the better hitters in the minor leagues and doing it at an age when very few guys perform at that level. He's playing a good shortstop. Inside the clubhouse, he is the guy that everybody gravitates to. He's just continuing to show all those special qualities that we saw when we drafted him. And, obviously it's something we talk about all the time. The good thing about him is that, he has his feet planted, where he is, and he's there to win and to dominate whatever level he's at. But it's hard not to take notice of what he's doing.
Last couple of things sort of from a higher level. It's, last year you talked about in hindsight what you may have done differently at the trade deadline. With any trade deadline, do you have to be all in one way or the other? I mean, do you have to be a buyer? Do you have to be a seller? You did a little bit of both last year. Is that something you wouldn't want to do again? Or are there ways that, a team that maybe is in the hunt can be improved while still looking at deals long-term? Like, has that changed for you, the way you look at trade deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. When you ask, would I want to be there again? I mean, look, part of the reason we were there is because we weren't in a particularly satisfying position. You'd love to be in a position where it's very clear that, you are, it's all in front of you. And, that's where we were in 2021 when we were in the trade deadline. And obviously, I think what we did then aged better than people felt about it at the time. But of course, we'd love to be in that position. It just means your season's going really well. But, I don't think your question is really about that. I think it's more about, hey, can it make sense to do some of both? I think the answer is yes. And I think last year where we were, that was, the right course of action for us. And you can look around the industry in recent years, and there's been some really transformative trade deadlines in a good way for clubs that did do some of both. So I definitely think you can do it. Obviously, how you execute on that and some of the specific things that you do, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And obviously that's something that there's room to assess. I do think, broadly speaking, where we were, that made sense for us to pursue. And sometimes, when you're in that position, there are things that you do. I mean, look, obviously when we traded Christian at the time, it was really tough for our clubhouse, and it was tough for the organization, and obviously super unpopular with everybody following the club. I think now everybody can see why we did it. And, that was the nature of that trade, that it wasn't going to pay off in the short term, although Reese came in and did an incredible job down the stretch. And, performance wise, I think we did well with that, but we understood that was going to be a blow inside the clubhouse. So that can be the right course of action. It obviously depends what moves you execute along that plan. And, I've said, obviously, with where we were, the fact that we chose to continue to compete and stay over the CBT line, obviously was something that I'm happy as an organization that we had the backing to do that, but obviously it didn't work out. And that's something we have to live with. And those are the choices that you look at. But looking ahead, look, I want to be in a better position than that, where the path is more clear. But ultimately, you're trying to make yourself a better organization however you can. And I say this a lot, and I think it's been true in the time that I've been here. People like to talk about short-term, long-term. It's true that there are trade-offs in life, right? And sometimes you end up having to decide which side of those trade-offs you want to be on. But what happens a lot in baseball is that when you take your focus off of that and just focus on what are good moves that we can make, sometimes even if they may look to be long-term oriented, sometimes in the short term you reap rewards for that too. And, I've pointed to some different things that we've done, and you're seeing some of them, frankly, this year so far with some of the players who have emerged for us. But, we saw some of this in 21. If you're pedal to the metal going into 21, you're not taking a Rule 5 guy, because that's more something oriented towards the future. And when we took Garrett, that's what we thought the most likeliest outcome was going to be, that, you're going to roll with this guy during the season and keep his head above water. And then you're developing him for the future. Guess what? He turned out to be one of our best pitchers. So sometimes the baseball gods have your back when you just try to focus on making good moves.
All right, last question. If there's one criticism from fans I've heard, it's the Tampa Bay thing. It's that Chaim Bloom is trying to make the Red Sox the Tampa Bay Rays North. Tampa Bay's run off to the best record in the American League. Is that an insult? If somebody says you're trying to recreate Tampa Bay, whether it's here or anywhere, it would seem, I mean, again, I'm looking at the standings. I was like, I'll take it. Like, how do you react when you hear that? Because you've heard it.
Yeah, I try not to dwell on that too much, mainly because I just think it's sort of silly. Like we're just trying to win. Every organization is going to win by being the best version of itself. And, obviously we've talked about a lot. When I started here, we were in a position where, certainly up front, but even over time, we were going to have to do some things that were more long-term oriented. We were going to have to do some things that wouldn't be popular in the moment to give ourselves the best chance to ultimately win the most. And guess what? Even if, as you go forward as an organization, that exists all the time. It's one of the essential challenges of really any organization. It just looks a little different in each place. So you got to be your best self. So if someone were to say that, I'd actually want to say, hey, what do you mean by that? And then I can tell you if I agree with it or not. But as far as a comment out there, I don't spend too much time on it. We're focused on beating them.
Great stuff. Chaim, thank you. We appreciate the visit.
You bet.
Oh, great conversation. Always great to hear from Bloom. Seems like a long time ago he was being booed on the stage at Winter Weekend. I think most people agree this team has been a pleasant surprise. It's been fun to watch. Even in the games they lose, they are right in the games. 2-1 2 nights ago, 4-0 last night, but it was 2-0 until Trout got his inevitable home run late in the game. It's a team that battles, and now we'll see if this roster as constructed can maybe get them going in the right direction. I'll tell you what, I would rather see a team not hitting and pitching, because the offense, which has been good most of the year, should come back. They got a lefty tonight. I think they're 12-5 against left-handed starters this year. Got a losing record against right-handed starters, which is surprising. But that should be a good way to get this offense going. So when your offense is quiet, usually the belief is the bats will come around. If your pitching's a mess, then you're a mess. And the pitching hasn't been great for a lot of the season. Suddenly it is. So we'll see if they can bring it together, maybe get one in Anaheim before enjoying a day off in Arizona. I want to thank Chaim Bloom for spending the time to talk with us about the state of the team. Want to thank you for checking us out, and we'll do it again next week from Fenway Park. That was this edition of the TC and Company podcast. Thanks for checking it out.